What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Rocket Live. I am your host, Chris Vaglio, and I appreciate each and every one of you for taking the time today to listen to an episode of the Rocket Live podcast. As always, today's interview was audio taken from a video that I did with my guest. So 3 quick things I just want to let everybody know of at the top of the show. Number 1, you can always watch all of the video versions of these interviews over on the Rocket Growth Agency YouTube channel, and you can access the link directly to this interview by using the link in the show notes. And also, while you're there too, please feel free to hit that subscribe button so that way you get notified every single time a new video is uploaded to the channel. And also, please hit that subscribe button wherever you are listening to this podcast. Number 2, if you enjoy the show and want to help and support the podcast, 2 ways you could do that is using the link in the show notes and heading over to Buy Me a Coffee. And over there, you can feel free to buy me a coffee and set whatever amount that you would like or that you feel most comfortable with. And another way that you can support the show is you can head over to my merch store, which you can access through the links here in the show notes. And feel free to buy a piece of merchandise. We have all kinds of cool branded Rocket Growth Agency and Rocket Live merch over there. And every time you buy a piece of merch, you're not only supporting the show, but we also do donate a portion of the proceeds to local charities here in New Jersey. And number 3, if you're a creative business professional right now that's listening to this and you need help creating a rock star business and brand that will help you get noticed, feel confident, and bring in more clients, then I definitely want to talk with you. Please feel free to use the link in the show notes and schedule a free 30-minute consultation with me, as I'd be happy to help to get your business rocking. Now with that, let's start the show. Without further ado, I want to bring on our outstanding guest for today. I'm really excited to have him on. I got Mr. Ricky McEachern on with us today. Podcaster, artist, all around, traveled, educated, creative individual. How are you, man?
I'm doing great.
I really appreciate you coming on today and spending some time with us because I know there's a lot I'd like to dig into with all the different things you're involved in. So Ricky, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself? And I know I put a lot in the notes and things like that, but see, I have the unique fortune of knowing you for a little bit, but for everybody out there listening, why don't you give everybody a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I am an artist living in Chicago. I am an oil painter. I do representational art. This is an example of some of my art behind me. And I also host a weekly podcast called Eager to Know, which is conversations with creative leaning people. So I talk to all sorts of creative people. My background is not in creativity. It's not in a creative area at all. Although I was a super creative kid,
Right.
Elementary school, 4th grade, I was kind of the artsy kid.
Mm-hmm.
I fell in love with science around 5th grade.
Okay.
And I kind of dropped the artsy thing and I ended up pursuing a career more focused on science. So I have a degree in engineering. I have a degree in plastics engineering, which is kind of a weird degree. And my first career was in industrial sales. So I worked for global chemical companies selling plastic, which was a really good job for some people. It wasn't the right job for me. I then transitioned to something different. I got into internet technology. And I was a developer, and then I was a project manager. So neither one of those jobs are very creative. Ultimately, about 10 years ago, that elementary school kid, he kind of came up, and I decided that I really need to express my creative side, and which it really wasn't dormant. It would reveal itself in different ways. So I started painting. And then I moved to Chicago 4 years ago, and I moved here not knowing anybody and not knowing really anybody in the art community. And I figured I need a way to get myself to show myself as a creative individual, as opposed to posting artwork on Instagram.
Right.
So I decided I would do a podcast. I like to talk. I'm very curious. So I figured I would talk to other painters. And it quickly turned into something much bigger than that, because I realized that I have a lot more questions for creative people who don't do what I do. So if you're creative and you're not a painter, I have a lot more questions for you. And also I realized that I can expand my audience, not my audience, the guests, outside of people that do roles that are considered traditionally creative. And so really the guests that I have, it's really quite broad.
Yeah. And I have listened, and you have, I mean, you got a lot of episodes of this podcast. I mean, you're like in the 90s now, I think.
Yeah, I am editing 98 today.
Yeah, so you're getting close at 100th episode.
I am. I know. I got to figure out what I'm going to do for 100.
I know you got to do something spectacular, because I mean, it's 100th episode. I mean, that's quite an accomplishment. But that's one of the things I really love about your podcast is, and we'll get into this because I know it's part of the mission of the show and what you're doing. But yeah, you have a great diversity of guests that come on and talk about all the different things, that they do. In fact, we just had a comment from Meredith Grundy, who says, "Great podcast, by the way." But she was just recently a guest on the show, and even her background is fascinating. And I think that you have a really great way of finding people with like these backgrounds or the things that they're doing, but then really digging in to like why they do what they do, where they're like, how you just told the story of like where you came from, and sort of like the paths and where they led you. You have a great way of doing that. And I've said that to you before, like the way you interview people has a very like NPR-ish quality to it but I think that's good. I think that's a great quality as an interviewer.
Well, thank you. It all comes from my genuine curiosity, that I've had since I was the littlest kid. I mentioned that I fell in love with science. The reason why I fell in love with science was because in 5th grade, when Miss Letitia started teaching us about the atom, the electron, the proton, and the neutron, I was so excited that adults were obviously as curious as me, because that's what that meant to me. That meant to me that people were thinking about our world in a way that I didn't realize other people thought about the world. Even as a little kid, I know that sounds crazy, but when I was taught about the atom, I totally bought into it. I'm down with this. I get it. I understand what Miss Letitia is telling me. And I was very, very excited that other people were curious. So this curiosity is really what drives this whole thing. When my interviews it's not an act. Like I am genuinely curious about not just what people are producing and doing creatively. I want to know how you got there. And what's different about you? Because I very quickly realized that most of us are the commonalities amongst everyone. It's much bigger than I thought. And we all hear we're all the same. And I was always like, yeah, whatever. When I started doing the podcast, I realized that the percentage of what we all have in common is way bigger. So in the podcast, I am trying to find out what is different about your experience that's unique to you, and what my guests can learn, what my audience can learn from that.
Yeah, and I think that's really great. And this ties in directly to, I know, one of the missions of the show, which is that unlocking that first grader inside of you, that creativity. And I think that's really great, because how you were saying how the excitement of learning about the atom and how that works, and just being like, oh my gosh, this is like a real thing that makes up everything in our world. And it's that genuine curiosity that then sparks the creativity. And I think that's a really cool part of your mission is to say that trying to awaken that first grader inside of you to tap into that creativity. I think that just goes along with everything that you were just saying.
Yeah. When you think about being in 1st, 2nd grade, when we would have art class, it really wasn't art class. I mean, at least for me, 1st and 2nd grade, everything was done in one room, and we would have art period. And all of this stuff would be brought out, art supplies. And I think that when you're in 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, when you're doing the art period, there is no art star. No 1st grader is saying, I can't even draw a stick figure, which is what adults say all the time.
Right.
First graders don't say that. They just do it. And what's great about doing that as a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, you're using a part of your brain that we all still have. And it's your imagination, and it's taking your imagination and kind of formulating a plan on how I'm going to execute what is in my head onto the paper. And then you do it, and then you look at what you got, and then you experience feelings based on what you got, and maybe you share it, and maybe you talk about it. And you do that as a youngster, you do that without judging yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Our brains are kind of the same as adults.
Yeah.
So we still have the ability to do that. And all of that process that I just described, I don't necessarily think that adults do that process. And I think it's really important to do that.
Yeah. You know what? It's a great point, because I think what happens is we grow up, we become adults, right? And things change, right? We're just not as open or perceptive, right? I just feel like we forget, we forget. I think we're capable. We have it still in us, but at some point we just forget how to use that part of us and that process. And we don't rely on it anymore. And we sort of replace it with this like adult version. And I think we begin to lose that sense of wonder. We just begin to lose touch with that part of ourselves, which I think just happens, And so I feel like that rediscovering and getting back in touch with that part of yourself that is actually still there, I think is big. I think it's huge. And I think this speaks to creativity, and why I know one of your things that you often talk about is, listen, everybody's creative. Everybody has creativity inside of them, what they're doing. It's just, how are they expressing it? How are they doing it? It doesn't always necessarily have to become a painting behind you or a book, or, it really, creativity is what you personally make of it and how you're being creative in what you're doing. And so that's another big part of your show. As I listen to your interviews, how you're able to get people to realize that and draw the parallels of, it's not so much like what's creative and what's not creative, but just like what they're doing and how that is looked at as creative and the perception of what is creativity.
Yeah. Well, I think when we become adults, obviously there's a branching where there's the kids that go on the creative path, and then there's the kids that go on the non-creative path. I obviously went on the non-creative path,
right.
And there's a lot of reasons for that. But I think, living in 2021,
mm-hmm.
so much of what we are being bombarded with is other people's creativity.
Right.
So it's all been pre-digested for you, and it's all been pre-packaged. Even the news, which used to be just facts, at least I remember it being facts when I was a kid. Now it's all narrative, and there's teams of people that are these are creative people in many cases who are repackaging everything that you're seeing. And even when you go to a store, if you go to a Target, it's not like you would go to a maybe 50 years ago, if you went to a store, there would be a person who designed the interior of the store. And it was like their job to figure it out. Now it's all, you go to a Target, it's all been figured out in corporate, and they just tell people what to do. So just everything is already been figured out by other creative people. So, I tell this to people all the time who say they want to be creative, but then they spend all weekend watching Netflix. And I'm like, do you know that you are experiencing someone else's creative dream?
Right.
That's what you're experiencing. It's someone else's dream was to create a script, to be a director, and you are absorbing that. And you feel like you're being creative, but you're really not. And I think that it's harder and harder because of the way everything is being delivered to us. And so there is creativity everywhere, but it's being delivered to us. And I think that you have to proactively find ways to create yourself.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I think that, so for me, like, I know personally and this is me personally. So I know as I'm watching shows, whatever they are, And whether I'm listening to other podcasts or I'm reading things, I mean, for me, obviously, yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'm entertained, which was part of that. But I am like, I get so inspired and so influenced by so many things around me. And those things to me are like these little sparks, like for me, like I kind of need that creative stimulation because I so much get stuck in me like, oh my God, this is terrible. I just want to burn this down. This sucks. Like, but I don't listen or look at other things and get like, beat myself up with that. I look at it because it's like, like when I listen to your show, like I listen to the way you interview people and that inspires me because I say, wow, I really like the way Ricky interviews people. Like this makes me want to be a better interviewer and how to ask right questions or how to go a little bit deeper and probe. So I get really inspired by other people's creativity because I want to, better my game or just, become more motivated and say, wow, that song is great. I love the way that goes. And like, so how do I take that feeling and then parlay that into, basically my day? Like, how can I weave that same energy into all the things that I'm doing? And that's how I ingest and interpret, like, other than just being purely entertained and say, I just got to switch it off for a couple hours. So, like going to see Ghostbusters over the weekend was just like pure joy for me. It was awesome. It was so nice to sit in a theater and just like turn off for like, a couple hours and just enjoy that film. But even still, I walked out of there feeling like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Like just being completely inspired. But that's, and I think that there is that, right? Like consuming other people's creative, which we do day in and day out. But then also like, then how do you use that? Is it just, hey, I'm just purely entertained, which is totally fine? Or are you using it to motivate and inspire the things that you're doing, which is all artists, anybody that's been creative, that's all we ever do, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree 100%. I think there's definitely a range between consuming content that is just a distraction versus observing creative stuff that is truly inspiring. There's some podcasts that I listen to which I probably shouldn't listen to because it's just people like yelling and so when I'm listening, the reason why I listen to it is I don't have to think. Like I'm basically shutting my brain off and I am just hardwired into this person's brain and it's just a break. But I also can experience things like I have art books that I look at all the time. My house is filled with art books and I will look at artwork all the time as a way to inspire myself. I just saw a movie the other night, which I can't believe I never saw this movie, called The Artist. Did you ever see this movie?
I actually have never seen it, but I know about it.
This movie was so good. I think it maybe won an Academy Award.
Wow.
I think the actor won an Academy Award.
Okay.
But it's probably one of my favorite movies of all time. And it was very inspiring. It made me rethink of a whole bunch of things that I do. And I think one of the reasons why I liked it, it was super simple. It was fairly simple. Right. It was a fairly simple story. And it's a story about silent movies. So it's essentially a silent, cool. It's a black and white silent movie. It was just filmed about 10 years ago, but it is stylized in this clean, simple way that silent movies were filmed. And because there is no color and because there is no sound, it's a much simpler delivery. And your brain has to sort of fill in a little bit more. So your brain isn't just dead it actually has to fill in the blanks. It's kind of like the difference between reading a book and seeing a movie based on the book. Like your brain has to be a bit more active. And after I saw that movie, it was so inspiring that someone could tell such a beautiful story in such a simple way. And I thought, and there was also some clever elements to it that was just an example of, the opposite of listening to the podcast of someone yelling.
Yeah. Completely different experience.
Where you're consuming, content that's inspiring.
Yeah, and I think that is, like you said, I think that's the big difference is, just having content that just sort of like hits you and, lets you check out, and then other content that actually like motivates you, inspires you, and, really gets you going and gets you thinking. And so now I'm like, I gotta go check out this movie. Cause I remember the trailers for it now and being like, that looks really cool, and then just never seeing it. Now you're like bringing it back, and I'm like, all right, now I got to put this on my must watch list.
Yeah, it's on Amazon Prime. So if you're a Prime member, it's free.
Yeah, which is another thing, right? Remember how hard we were just talking about, like the ease of like how we're able now to do things like this, and still find ways of like kind of like, oh, it doesn't work and this is that, but but it's like, here we are, like we could just dial up a film and watch it. We just talked about it. Now I can go on and that's the technology is now there where we could just like watch anything we want at whim.
I remember years ago, I was at the beach with my friends, and it was before the iPod came out, but it was when Napster, like MP3 players, were a thing. And I think we must have had cell phones. Mm-hmm. And I remember telling people, someone needs to create a device that, because we're at the beach,
right,
that you can actually download music from the internet onto like your boombox at the beach and listen to it. And everyone was like, whoa, that is crazy. And I just thought I was so smart because I thought of this thing. And now obviously all this stuff is exceeded our expectations.
As 100% exceeded our expectations. I mean, it's like, and this is why, and also I think this ties in though to like talking about content and creativity, but also podcasting and things like that, where, I know the joke is like, well, everybody has a podcast now. And, listen, I've got 2 shows. You've got a couple things you're working on. We've got, the access to Instagram lives and things like this. And just our ability to be able to broadcast to an audience, go live at any moment in time or record things that people consume still absolutely blows me away. But I think that what you're just talking about, like the ability to be able to do that, and I think the explosion of, podcasting and audio and video in this live stream is really been I'm not going to say game changer, but it's been something that's really, I think, has gotten people to step out of their comfort zones a little bit more than what they normally would have done. And I feel like that more and more people, because it's such an accessible technology, that it's easy for anybody right now to, I say easy, but honestly, it's pretty much as easy as you can create an entire podcast right from your phone. I mean, you could literally, and there's services out there where you could just do it all and it's automated. And so I could do a 10-minute show and put it up there and get it up for people to listen to or to watch or whatever. And I think that where the joke, everybody has a podcast. Yeah, it's funny. But then again, it's also like, well, it comes back to, well, who's your audience, right? And who are you trying to grow? And I think that oftentimes people automatically think, well, you need Joe Rogan type audience. And if you can't have a Joe Rogan type audience, then this is kind of a waste of your time. And I vehemently disagree with that, because your audience is your network, right? The people you're connected to. So if it's 50 people, hey, your audience is 50 people, and that's great. And that's 50 people that are going to support you and are interested in what you're doing. If your audience is, 500 people, 1,000 people, whatever it is, like, you're creating content that comes from you that the people around you are interested in. And that, to me, that's the first win. So when people make the jokes of, well, everybody has a podcast, well, yeah, but I'm producing content because the people around me, the people who support me, the network I'm in, they find what I have to say interesting or informative or entertaining or whatever it is. And I think that that's really, at the end of the day, like, that's the most important thing, and I wanted to see like what your thoughts were on that, because I know that you're super active, and your shows, you've been doing your show. You're, like I said, you're almost 100 episodes in. Your show's been growing. Your audience is growing, and I know there's other things that you've got sort of in the hopper, things like that. But I mean, what are your thoughts on the everybody has a podcast type of thing?
Well, there's definitely a low barrier of entry to
Yeah,
get your content out there.
right.
So, it used to be a very small door to get your whatever out to the world.
Yeah.
Now it's a very large door and everyone's in the room. So you have to, my thought is I don't want to take this for granted that I have
Mhm.
the ability to do this. I am very careful about what I put out.
Mhm.
And careful meaning I want to pay attention to what my audience is interested in and what my
Right.
audience finds valuable. I don't want to be in a situation where I am just doing what feels like the right thing to do for that day. I'm
Mhm.
just having a creative experience on a podcast. And if you don't like it, too bad. That's not my approach. Like
Right.
I reach out to my listeners quite often
Mhm.
to get feedback, to find out what is, it's not what they like. What do they find valuable? Because
Right.
I really want to help people see themselves differently in the world and what is helpful in doing that. So I think that's really important, is just to be really, I wouldn't say focused is the right word, but just be very aware of what it is you are trying to do, what you're trying to get out there, what your message is, what you're trying to, whether you're influencing people and what that is, and making sure that the content that you put out is supporting that. The other thing, the other comment that I just want to make about this is a bigger idea.
Right.
When we talk about low barrier to entry, living in 2021, we have so many advantages of information that we have available to us,
Mhm.
and things that we can do. I'm doing a lot of video editing for a new project, and I can't help but think of when people were creating movies in the late 20s, that they had to like slice film. And I had to remind myself to be, when I'm bitching about Final Cut Pro, how
Yeah.
grateful I am that I am able to do all this. So I guess my point is there's no excuses. Like if you don't know how to do something, you can go on YouTube and find out information
So true.
immediately. So
Yes.
it all comes back to you and your ability to stay motivated, to stay focused, and to whatever it takes for you to do it. All of the tools are out there, all of the channels are available to you, and everything is mostly free. So it
Yeah.
really comes back to you and being focused and motivated, and having a clear vision of what you want to do, because everything is available for you to do it.
Yeah, 100%. I love everything you just said there, because I think that was really great advice too about when you're creating content and being mindful. I think that is big, and that's not to say, don't try. Like, listen, everybody has to start somewhere, and you've got to try things out, and you've got to experiment. I mean, this is, it's still creativity at the end of the day. Not everything's going to be a home run, but that's all right. The more you do it, the better you get. So don't be dissuaded. And the technology is there. And the thing is yes, there is access to so many resources, a majority of them free, to get your questions answered. Like, literally, if you haven't done this, I mean, go into Google, go into YouTube, and literally type in how do I, and there's probably about 30 different videos or more made to answer just that one question. And they're out there, because I do that too. I still am active in editing. I create content, and there's things I just get stuck on, or I just can't remember how to do. And I could go right onto YouTube and boom, oh, there it is. Great. There's the tutorial. Oh, now I remember how to do it, or now I know how to do that. Because I just didn't know how to do it before. I didn't know what the shortcut was, or I didn't know, that I had to go into settings and uncheck this little thing to make that work. And it's like, oh, geez, well, I'm so glad this video exists, because now I know exactly how to do that. But I agree with everything that you said. I think that was really spot on. So for anybody listening or watching out there, if you're thinking about creating a podcast or a live stream, or I mean, really whatever, think about what Ricky said there about, just being mindful about your audience and, what they may want from you, and sometimes it takes a little experimenting but it also just straight up ask, just ask, see what they say. I mean, have that conversation. I think that's huge. I really think that's huge advice.
Yeah. I recently had on my podcast a opener. There's a new tea bar around the corner from me, Eli Tea Bar in Chicago. And I interviewed the owner, and he talked about when he wanted to, his background was as a research scientist. So when he opened up a tea bar, he asked a lot of questions, and he did a lot of research on what failed with other similar businesses and what was successful. So it was a more of an entrepreneurial mindset as opposed to like a creative expression. Like, I just have this dream and I'm going to just do it. He was like, well, I got that, but you know what? I'm going to do a little research because I want to make sure that the foundations of what I'm putting are solid in business.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's extremely wise, and I think that's a really great perspective on that, for sure. I have a question for you, and I know we're starting to wind down, but I think that this is I'd really like to hear your answer to this, because I think that I am not a painter. I can't paint for anything. I'm not very good at it. In my head, I feel like, I could do it. And then I try and it just looks like garbage. But I love your paintings and I love your art. And I would love to know from you how you view, like, now you do a lot of podcasting, you're involved in that kind of content creation side of things. And you still are a painter, so it's not like you've stopped painting, but how did painting and you doing that art help you translate that or make the move into more podcasting and content creation on that side? Like, were there parallels? Were there lessons learned from that you were able then to apply to podcasting? How do the two really, work with each other as far as skill sets and creativity?
That's a really good question. I think it was a sequence of creative transformation, so to speak, where like a door unlocked. And I think becoming a competent painter gave me confidence in my creative brain. It also kind of rewires your brain a little bit, because when you are painting, you have to look at the world around you in a way that is different than when you're just walking around going for a walk, because you're looking for different things. You're looking for changes in value. You're seeing things as shapes. So it's just a different way of looking at the world. And so that sort of started to unlock some doors for me. And that ultimately led to really doing the podcast, because I would not have been able to have the conversations that I am having with people, even if they're not painters, if I hadn't gone through that process of changing my brain in that way. And the reason why I said it was sort of a transformational journey, because that journey sort of started when I picked up photography. And I picked up photography, I think, around 2008. And that was somewhat in the same way. When you are walking around taking photographs with a camera, you're experiencing the world in a different way, because you're looking at things, you're looking for the shot, and it kind of changes the way you view the world. So that sort of got extended even further in painting. And I think it's just a progression of how my creative brain evolved, and it sort of turned into the podcast. And I think my next venture, is taking further.
Yeah, see, and that's why I wanted to ask that question, because I do find it fascinating, and I wanted to see like how the one thing carries over into the other and how it helps. And the key thing I took away from that was, like you said, the rewiring of your brain and how that process in itself then helps you to, do the interviews you do and helps you to produce those shows. And I think that's really interesting to me because I feel like that is, it's really, I think, great insight into how whatever it is that you're doing and how you can carry that things over and those lessons learned then help you to apply to create something new. And I think that I don't know. I love hearing that because I find that extremely fascinating. That end of things is like you're learning the discipline and how you view the world through painting, and then how that now carries through to, interviewing your guests on the show and getting them to talk about things that maybe, or being asked things that not necessarily that they may have been asked in another interview, or maybe have never been asked. Who knows? So I find that process that you just described very, very fascinating to me, and thanks for sharing that.
Of course. And I'm not unique. I am not anything special. I am just like anybody else. So I think that if you put the human brain is so adaptable,
right?
And, anyone who puts themselves into a new experience, you have potential to, and you're open to it, to change the way you view the world around you and your relationship to the world around you.
Yeah, I think that is super key. And I think that's something to be very mindful of, as people are creating. I think people have a tendency of really getting down on themselves on the things they do, or I can't do this, or how could this ever translate? And I feel like that's, that's just it's just head trash is really what it is at the end of the day, because everybody's capable of doing anything that they want. Like, you're born with all your abilities, like you have them and you've used them. We're all born with everything that we absolutely positively need to succeed or create or do whatever we want in life. It's just a matter of tapping into them and utilizing the best parts of ourselves, all our strengths, and not viewing them as weaknesses or anything like that, and just leaning into all that. I truly do believe that. And I think that oftentimes, as human beings, because that's what we're humans, we get really wrapped up into our own heads and wind up not using things or looking at things differently than we probably should, because not that anybody's told us this, it's just this perception we've built up of ourselves that keeps us from, truly doing some of the things that we really want to do. Very good.
I agree.
Any final words?
Let's see. I was going to, I think, I guess I was going to give a little bit of advice if people are looking to
do it.
This relates to what you were just saying. And, I think a big part of being competent in anything creative is just consistency and not being upset with how you do. And I tell people all the time who, you mentioned that you can't draw or paint, if you took, rather than, if I don't know what you do in the morning when you're drinking your coffee, but a lot of times people are on the internet reading news. If you take that half hour and you did a still life, get a sketch pad and a pencil, and you did a still life for that half hour instead of reading the news every morning, I think you'd probably you're not going to be happy maybe the first week, but I think within a couple of weeks, you're going to be shocked at how your brain is actually going to start making connections, and your still life is going to be pretty good, or it's going to be further along in a half hour. Now, whether that is a still life, or whether it's writing a short story every morning, or whether it's writing a poem, or even if it's just writing in your journal or something where you're not consuming, but you're actually creating. And just do the same thing consistently every day for a month, for like a half hour or 20 minutes, and just put it on your calendar. I think everyone would be shocked at how quickly the brain adapts.
I love that. I think that is huge advice. And it's that stuff I've told people myself, and it's advice I need to take for myself as well. Because you're right. I mean, one of the things I've been trying to work on forever has been like a book, and I just can't get going. Like I can only get so far, and it's really of my own making, of my own, reasons why. Nobody else is keeping me from doing it. It's all me. But I like that. And that's something I need to remember for myself is that, instead of doing that, maybe in the mornings, I do that. I write for 20 to 30 minutes and just get started and put that on my calendar. So I have everything else on my calendar. Why not just have like, hey, from 8 to 8:30 or 8:30 to 9:30, like I'm just writing for 30 minutes, even if it's like winds up becoming like 4 sentences. Hey, great. I wrote, like, good, done. So I love that. Well, I appreciate you coming on today. I feel like you and I could go on for another 2.5 hours of just like talking about creativity and art and podcasting and all the fun stuff. But I know everybody's going to get probably pretty bored of that very quickly. But no, I really appreciate you coming on today and spending some time with us and talking about sharing with us your background, your thought process, of course, talking about your show, which I really do enjoy your show a lot. It's called, for anybody listening, once again, the show is called Eager to Know, and you can get that anywhere you listen to podcasts, but mostly you want to head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Those are the two best places to listen to the podcast. And you can connect with Rick over at rickyartist.com. All these links are in the show notes, so you'll be able to access all of them anytime. And you can go over and follow Ricky on Instagram at eager, I guess that's _to_know. And then over at Ricky McEachern Artist, that's also his other Instagram account as well. And Meredith Grundy is checking in with a thank you both. So thank you, Meredith, for watching today. And make sure you listen to Meredith's episode of your show, because I thought that was a great, you guys were great together. That was a great episode.
Yeah, she was a wonderful guest. And I was so curious about improv, which is what we talked about.
Yeah.
So I went into it with tons of questions and she answered all of them. So that was wonderful.
Yeah, that was a really, really fun episode. I mean, a lot of your episodes you do are great. And I just, I encourage really anybody who's watching or listening to this to take a listen to Ricky's show, Eager to Know. There's a lot of great interviews on there, and I kind of feel like there's something for everybody on there. I think,
it's all sorts of all sorts of people. I have a lot of painters. I have some photographers. I have actors. I have musicians, singers, songwriters. I have an astrologer. I had a mind reader. I had a voiceover actor. I mean, how cool was that? Like, I had so many questions for this voiceover actor. And
that was a cool episode. I learned a lot from that. I thought, after working with voice actors for over 20 years, being in a production company, it's like, you're still learning. And I loved hearing, his side and his perspective. That was a really cool episode.
Plus he had such a great voice, of course. So
of course,
he sounded amazing.
Got to have that golden voice. That's the key part of it. Well, cool. Well, thanks so much, Rick, for coming on. I really appreciate it. And as I said, make sure everybody heads over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify to listen to Eager to Know. Make sure you follow him over there. Connect with Ricky. He's got, like I said, all his links are in the show notes, and also lots of sponsorship opportunities for Eager to Know as well. So if you're interested in becoming a Eager to Know sponsor on his podcast, definitely get in touch with him, because he's got a lot of cool opportunities there for sure. And you don't have to be an artist to advertise. It's just so you know, we're looking for sponsors of all shapes and sizes. All right, everybody. Well, this has been an awesome show. I'm really happy everybody could join us here live. I want to thank you all again for participating today, wherever you're watching us live. Thank you to everybody who will be watching the replay of this, wherever you're watching the replay. And for those of you that are listening to the audio version of this, I really appreciate each and every one of you. Of course, you can follow us right here, wherever you're connected with me, to watch the live shows, which most of the times happen on Tuesdays. So you can watch on Twitch, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. That's usually where we're streaming the show out live. And of course, you can connect with the audio version pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts. I want to thank our official show sponsor once again, Kerry Zarb of kerryzarb.com. You want to head over if you're a podcaster and you're looking to expand your reach and market your podcast. You want to download her 7 days of simple podcast marketing. Go right to kerryzarb.com/simple. That's kerryzarb.com/simple. 7 days of simple podcast marketing. Please support our show sponsors because they support us. And if you're looking for another way to support the show, you can head over to buymeacoffee.com/CVaglio. As I said at the top of the show, there's some bills to pay around here. And so every little bit helps. Or, if you just want to buy me a nice cup of coffee, which, I can always use. I'm always loving my cup of coffee. You can head over there and we would really appreciate it as it does help the show grow. And if you're looking to connect with me directly, you can text the words "Let's Rock" to 88500. That's the words "Let's Rock," no spaces, over to 88500. And that will give you access to all my contact information, as well as different links to download some things that I have, like a checklist and a quiz that I've got, and all kinds of other fun Rocket Growth Agency good time goodies, things, whatever. They're all there for you. So check them all out. All right. So with that, everybody, I'm going to leave you all. Ricky, any last final words before we sign off for the day?
Oh, gosh. I don't know. I think just doing something creative every day and not judging yourself if you're not great at what you're doing. Just set some time aside and do a little something every day consistently.
Awesome. Very wise words, my friend. Thank you so much for sharing that. And for all of you out there, always be authentic, always be yourself, and always remember to rock it. We will see you next time. Have an awesome rest of the week, everyone. Cheers. Once again, just want to thank everybody for listening to another episode of the Rocket Life podcast. Please hit that subscribe button wherever you are listening to this. And also, don't forget, you can watch the video version of this interview over on the Rocket Growth Agency YouTube channel. Just use the link in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and don't forget to rock it.